Hello world. If you're here for one of my Python programming channels, then this isn't the video for you. This is the video on how I paid off my house in 7 years. So I'm going to share the journey that I went on and maybe it'll help you. So first, how did I pay off my house? Well, I put more money than the monthly minimum payment. Thank you for watching this video. No, seriously. Let's start off with first, why did I pay off my video? So the first reason is here, take a look at my income. So the majority of it comes from my earned income from my current job. Then the next is my military retirement. Then after that is my disability income from the military. And then lastly is the little bit of dividend income. So that's what my income structure looks like. But one of my, and you can call it a vanity goal, is to get my expenses down to just my military retirement so I can save everything else. So that was one of my goals. Like I said, it's kind of a vanity goal, you know, it's not the best way of looking at it. And so, and then quickly, what this video is not is, I'm not a dual income, no kid family that has all this extra discretionary income. My wife does have a part-time job, but we also have 2 boys, 2 kids. And also I don't come from a wealthy family who throughout my life has paid for everything. And so this isn't one of those stories where I'm making $500,000 a year and I just quickly paid off my house and I'm trying to make a video. This is, you know, a real normal person paying off their house in 7 years. So another way of looking at this, the reason why, is opening up free cash flow. So in about 2019, I had about $190,000 left on my mortgage. And so then I thought, hey, I'm about to retire from the military. I want to free up as much income as possible, or you know, by reducing expenses. And so I had $190,000 left, and I figured if I paid down that mortgage, my mortgage was $1,600 a month, times 12 months, would come out to about $19,200. So $190,000, and I would generate or save $19,200. That's like a 10% yield, if you will. But that's not really how it works, right? By paying off your house, you don't necessarily earn money. So if I just quit my job, I wouldn't earn that $19,200. And so the second question why is, would I recommend it? Would I recommend to you to pay off your house? Well, you know, I wouldn't, but it depends on your goals. So when we talk about paying off a house, most people think about, oh, you know, your interest payments, these are the lowest interest payments, 4.3, 3%, 2%. And that's great for figuring out how much you can afford, but most personal finance people consider houses as the total interest rate or interest percentage, the TIP. So my house was my loan was $220,000, and by the end of it, I would pay $400 and something thousand, or an 86% interest rate. So if that was a credit card, that would be crazy. But that's over the lifespan of 30 years, right? So while that's pretty crazy, that's over 30 years, and it's the same mortgage payment more or less throughout your whole time. So I have the power of hindsight, we all do, and due to COVID in March of 2020, we would realize that I would be a lot wealthier now if I had invested that money in stocks, basically anything. If I bought a new house, Pokemon cards, baseball cards, cryptocurrency, hashtag Team Shib. So I'm on Team Shib. And so, but again, one of the real reasons why I wanted to do this is because my wife and I are about to start a small business, and I wanted my expenses as low as possible, just in case the small business goes awry, I could float it for several months. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let's go into tip number 1. So tip number 1 is buy the right house. Yes, I know, I hate personal finance videos that do this too. They start off in reverse. For example, are you in debt? Well, try not going into debt. And 5 years ago, pay off your credit cards. You know, that's not very helpful if you're just watching that. But it is very important to understand how you can pay off your house. So what I mean by buying the right house is the average, now this is all depending on where you're from and where you're buying a house, but typically good personal finance suggests 450 to 500 square foot a person. So I have a family of 4 and I have a 2,000 square foot house, and that is something my wife and I looked for. So if you are, I don't know, mid-20s and it's just 3 of you, you know, you have a little baby and you're in a 2,700 square foot house, you have way too much house, and the data suggests you're going to foreclose or short sell. I'm sorry. The second one is standard personal finance. So whether you can afford a house is about 30% of all housing expenses, right? The mortgage or your rent or your utilities, and 1% roughly per maintenance. And so all of that should be 30% of your house or of your post-tax income. And if you hit 30%, then you're doing just fine to pay off your house on time. But if you're trying to pay off your house quickly, then you should look at 20% or lower. So my mortgage, all my utilities, everything was only about 19% of my income when I bought it. Now, of course, when I retired and got a new job, it was way less, which allowed me to expedite how quick I paid it off. And so that's the first step. I know it's a reverse step and I apologize, but I think it's important that you start off, if you have a goal to pay off a house early, to buy the right house. All right, so step number 2 is reduce your expenses. And so for you to pay off your house, unless you get a side gig or earn extra income, and that's not the intent of this video, the second way is to reduce your expenses. So if you've already bought the right home and you're below 30%, closer to 20%, another way is to reduce your expenses. So my wife and I have no credit cards, we have no car payments, we have, you know, semi-good services in terms of internet and unlimited data plans, but we kept our expenses low basically throughout my whole life. And so reducing your expenses frees up income that you could put towards your house. So a practical example is if you have a, you know, $90, I don't know, advanced cable package, or 180 advanced cable package, and you get rid of it and you just get Hulu, Disney Plus, ESPN for $65 or whatever. You know, you saved quite a bit of money, like $120, and that can go into your mortgage. And people laugh at this because it's just a small amount, but paying off, you know, adding extra payments, so like bi-weekly payments or reducing your expenses, the way an amortized house loan works is putting little bits of money early saves tons of money in the future. So tip number 2, reduce your expenses and you will pay off your mortgage faster. Okay, so tip number 3 is other people's money. And this is one of the best strategies to do any personal finance goals, you know, sales, stuff like that. But I rented out my house for 2 years. So we were here where my house is currently located, and then we were at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. for 2 years, and I rented it out. And even after paying a property manager, I was able to put an additional $175 towards my mortgage. In this market, you know, based on where you are, but where I'm at, I could have charged a lot more rent. And so that's a great way to pay down your mortgage. So you're already reducing your expenses and putting extra money towards your mortgage. And so if you rent it out, you know, somebody else is paying that mortgage and hopefully you're making profit and you can dump that towards your house as well. All right, so step number 4 is to sell losing investments. All right, so I said sell losing investments. So if you're not familiar with personal finance, I suggest you read, and these aren't personal finance books, a book called The Undoing Project or Thinking, Fast and Slow. Thinking Fast and Slow. And the authors of the studies that kind of generate those 2 books, they did a long study that we suck at timing the stock market. So what we usually do, due to a principle called mental accounting, is we sell winning investments in our portfolio and keep our losing ones, hoping that they come back up. The problem with that, the data suggests like 80% or more, I don't know the exact number, but the reason why stocks go up is because they're doing well. And usually they'll continue doing well. So selling off winners, you know, is overall, as a percentage, a bad strategy. And the reason why stocks do poorly or they're losing is because they're not doing well. So getting rid of those and cutting your losses early are a great way. So one of the things I did was I cut some losing stocks and poured that into and this is from my taxable account. I don't suggest selling losing investments in your IRA and taking penalties and paying taxes. But cutting those losses, and that allows you to do something called tax loss harvesting. So if you did sell some winners, you can offset that with selling the losers. So I did migrate some money from my investments, which I personally felt the stock market was too high, especially how fast we came back from the COVID drop. You know, the price to earnings ratios, and that's not the intent of this video, but it's just a very hot market in my opinion. So moving those losing investments to the house made sense to me. All right, tip number 5 is I moved some of that dividend income I mentioned before from my taxable account to the house. I don't really suggest this. Some of the best returns on long-term investing comes from dividend reinvestment. So, but my goal, and we'll talk about this in the next tip, but I wanted to be focused on this goal. So if you remember in my last tip, I said that the stock market was kind of too high. So to me, reinvesting dividends in stocks that are already, overvalued didn't seem the best strategy to me. So I moved a lot of that to my home. Now this makes up a very small portion, but one of the vanity goals of this whole project was to pay off my house before I turned 40. And I was able to pay it off this month in October, and I turned 40 next month. So it's purely a vanity strategy. I only moved a couple thousand, well, it was several thousand from my dividend portfolio over to my home, and that was purely to meet this goal by October. I have started the automatic reinvestment back for those dividends, even though the market is still kind of high. So that's that tip. Don't suggest it for long-term investors. The power of dividend reinvestment, especially with hindsight and keeping those dividends invested during the lows of the COVID drop, I would have been wealthier. But again, the goal was pay off the house before I turned 40, so that's why I did it. And it's a good segue into the next tip. So the final tip, and this one is more what I call qualitative or abstract, if you will, and I am not a fan of those self-help influencers, but this is one of those type of tips, and that is to have hyper focus. So in tip number 5, I mentioned moving the dividends over, and that's because I was hyper focused on a goal. So if you're setting a goal to pay off your house, write it down, put it in Excel, identify all the sources that you're going to use and see when you can pay it off, and then just remain hyper focused. Paying off things is the most difficult financial goal. It's not rewarding, right? It doesn't feel like you're moving the ball forward towards the touchdown. It just feels like you're going horizontal and plateau. But I'm telling you, I paid in cash. I paid for cars in cash for almost 2 decades now. Being debt-free feels amazing. And I'm not even a huge Dave Ramsey supporter, so I know this fits in line with the baby steps, but paying off your house feels great. It's hard to even imagine, and this is my excited face, but trust me, I am excited about this. And I feel like if you pay off a credit card, a car, a house, if you pay for your vacations in cash, these are great feelings. But the road is probably kind of boring and not fun. So the last tip is hyper-focused. Whatever strategies you use, so whether you use bi-weekly payments, refinance, not cash out refinance, but keeping your mortgage payment the same but lowering the amount of years, whatever strategies you use, remain hyper-focused. And then speaking of other strategies, leave me a comment down below on the strategies that you use. I would love to hear more. Again, I didn't mean to disrespect any dual income, no kid families or the silver spoon families. I know you work hard too to save your money, but it is a lot easier when you don't have kids, or your parents have paid a lot for you as a kid, allowing you for early success due to the timing of how compounding investments work. So this was just some guy who was in the military, and if you know about our pay scales, it's not the place you go to get rich, but who is able to pay off my house in 7 years. So I hope this video enjoyed. If it did, please like this video. And then if you're into Python programming or my once a year personal finance videos, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Goodbye, world.